Howdy, y'all. This is Mr. Gonzalez, and this is the very first lesson for dual credit American history. We're going to take a look at North and South America and the people who inhabited North and South America prior to the arrival of Europeans, beginning with Christopher Columbus in 1492. Let's begin with a few theories about how the first humans arrived in North America. The most popular theory is that during the last ice age, so much of the Earth's water was frozen into glaciers that sea levels actually went down by about 350 feet. And this exposed a strip of land in this area between the far eastern part of Russia that we now call Siberia and the northwestern part of North America, which is now the state of Alaska. And according to this theory, the first inhabitants of North America arrived by crossing this land bridge. Why did they leave Siberia to come into North America? Well, they were probably following their source of food, which was the megafauna, the huge mammals that inhabited the earth during the Ice Age, woolly mammoths, mastodons, so on and so forth. Over time, they made their way south through what is now Canada, through what is now the United States, into Mexico, and eventually into South America. All the while following the megafauna, which they relied on not only for food, but also for clothing and for shelter. They made their clothing and their tents out of the hide of animals like the woolly mammoth and other animals. I should point out that there are some rival theories to this. Not everyone believes that this is how the first humans arrived in North America. The reason for this is it is believed that the Bering Sea land bridge first appeared around 15,000 years ago, and there are a few ancient campsites that have been discovered that are older than that. There are a few on this map. Meadowcroft, which is in Pennsylvania, and Cactus Hill, which is near Richmond, Virginia, are both believed to be around 17 or 18,000 years old. But nevertheless, most scientists believe that the first humans to live in North America arrived by crossing the land bridge. As the Ice Age ended, the glaciers began to melt and the water reclaimed the land bridge, and this formed the Bering Strait, which still exists to this day. The time period in North America before the arrival of Europeans can be broken down into three eras. The first era is the Paleo-Indian era, which lasted from approximately 15,000 to 10,000 years ago. During this time period, the first humans were arriving in North America by crossing the Bering Sea land bridge, and like I said, they were following the megafauna. They were following their source of food. These people were what we refer to as nomads, which means they had no set homeland. They were constantly moving from place to place. Now, the Paleo-Indian era ended when the last Ice Age ended. This, of course, caused the glaciers to begin to melt and to cover up the land bridge, but it also caused the megafauna to begin to die off. Now, if you were an archaeologist and you were studying this time period, you would notice a change that took place at the end of the Ice Age. During the Paleo-Indian era, the humans who lived in North America used spear tips that look something like this. These are referred to as Clovis points. Uh, the very first one ever discovered was found near the town of Clovis, New Mexico. That is where the name comes from. And these worked very well against the megafauna. However, once the Ice Age ended, you see a sudden change take place. Humans began hunting with what we now recognize as the traditional arrowhead. So this is the change that takes place at the end of the Paleo-Indian era. They go from hunting the megafauna, which died off at the end of that time period, to hunting smaller game animals like deer and birds and a variety of other things. After the end of the Paleo-Indian era, we enter what is called the Archaic era, which lasted from about 10,000 years ago to 2,500 years ago. It was during this time period that the people living in North and South America began to change their lifestyles from a nomadic one to a sedentary one. So what does sedentary mean? This means you are living in one place. You are not constantly moving around. So what happened? What caused these people to go from a nomadic lifestyle to a sedentary one? Well, they discovered agriculture. Once you start growing crops, you have to stay in a set place. You have to stay to tend to your crops. So this caused these humans to stay put, and they started to form farming communities. And in some cases, these communities grew into large towns, and in some cases, entire civilizations. Mesoamerica is the area that stretches from the southern half of Mexico and into Central America. Let me go ahead and show it to you on a map. This is where humans in North and South America first learned how to farm. We don't know exactly how it happened. It was probably by accident. Somebody was probably collecting grain and spilled some, and realized that wherever you drop the grain, drop the seeds, new plants grow. But they eventually mastered the practice of cultivating crops, and they grew many of the crops that we now associate with Native Americans, like squash, pumpkin, beans, and of course corn, or maize as it's sometimes called. Now, once humans discover agriculture and they're no longer constantly having to search for food, this gives them a little more time to focus on other things, such as art. So it's during this time period that you start to see Native American art appear. These are two photographs that I took in Arkansas. This is located in Petit Jean State Park in Arkansas. They're really dim. They're a little hard to see, but this appears to be a snake, and this looks maybe like a deer, maybe an antelope. Okay, after the Archaic period, we enter the pre-Columbian era. Now, if Columbian sounds familiar, that's because it is derived from the name Columbus. So this is the time period before Columbus. It lasts from around 500 BC to the arrival of Christopher Columbus in the year 1492. And it's during this time period that a wide variety of Native American cultures are being developed. Um, Something that is very important to remember is that where somebody lives determines what kind of lifestyle they lead. And let me give you an example. For the Native Americans that lived on the Great Plains, they were constantly following the buffalo. So they needed some kind of shelter that was easy to set up and easy to take down because they were never going to stay in one place very long. Well, it was these Native Americans that developed the teepee. On the other hand, if you were an Inuit Indian that lived up in Alaska, you would not live in a teepee, you would live in something like an igloo. So that's something that's very important to remember. Where you live determines the kind of lifestyle that you live. So this is what causes different Native American cultures to begin to emerge. And in the next video, we're going to take a look at some of the most important Native American cultures to develop during this time period.